Welcome to Work in Progress, Conversations with Creators. I'm your host, Logan Roy Speitman. I'm thrilled to have with me today Fred Frith, an absolutely legendary guitar player, musician all around, who revolutionized music in England in the late 60s with his band Henry Cow and went on to do a lot of amazing things that we talk about in the program. I hope that you enjoy.
If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
Hello, Fred. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So you've done a lot of things in your career, but you started out with Henry Cow. In 1968, I think you began in England, bringing kind of avant-garde music into, I don't know, the mainstream, but you were on Virgin Records.
The mainstream is something else. Yeah.
So I guess, let's talk a little bit about those days, that atmosphere, what inspired you. I know you were thinking about John Cage and all kinds of
I don't
stuff.
know how much thinking was going on. I think that the thing for my generation, our generation, is that at that point there was an explosion of attempts by the record industry to try to tap into a new demographic, which was students who had money. And so they were releasing records that they had no idea who would buy it or whether they would buy it or not. You could suddenly buy all kinds of things that you'd never heard of. So when I was 18, 19, there was a day when I heard Ornette Coleman, Captain Beefheart, and Luciano Berio on the same day,
right?
Without having any clue who any of them were. And so this kind of process, you could call it a process of the complete abandonment of musical hierarchies. We were no longer thinking about classical music as at the top of a very big hierarchy and pop music being at the bottom. It was all just coming in. It was just information. So I think Henry Cow, our eclectic approach is very much based on the fact that we were suddenly able to listen to Balinese music and, the band and
right.
whatever else.
Yeah, and that's that is kind of amazing, because then I think just a few years later, the record industry kind of closed a bit.
Well, they figured out what they could make money from.
Right.
They are, after all, a business.
Yeah, but it's kind of nice when you have these moments when, I try to do this on my show. I don't have any hierarchy. I have all kinds of people. And as long as they let me do it, I'm going to do it,
Absolutely. More power to you.
Now, Henry Cow, we were just saying, has come back together and created a new album that's about to be released.
Believe it or not, yes. It's a strange story because it was a friend of ours from Italy who was about to have a 60th birthday, and John Greaves said, how about we do a concert to celebrate his birthday as a surprise for him, because he was a big fan. And they proposed that we call the band Henry Now.
Yeah.
Which, again, being Henry Cow, we, of course, had endless discussions about whether this would be a good thing or not. And finally opted that we would do that. And I think, from my point of view, I like the idea that Henry Now would therefore mean whoever we wanted to be in it at any given time could be in it. It wasn't going to be a fixed thing.
Yeah.
But at that point, John and Tim and Chris and I got together, and these are improvising concerts in our own very particular way that we used to improvise. And we did 2 concerts in Italy, and they were both very well recorded. And then Max, the 60th birthday guy, said, hey, how about I release this? And so we had more endless discussions. And finally, I actually mixed and edited the material with a bit of help from Tim, and we're doing it. So it's coming out as Henry Now. Whether Henry Now will ever perform again, I would say, is highly unlikely, but you never know.
Did you have artistic disagreements this time around?
Artistic differences. Well, I think in the end there was a difference in philosophy, in as much as I think Tim and I leant towards the idea that Henry now gave us the opportunity to explore who we had become. In other words, to invite people, just like Henry Cowell always did. We often had guests, and so the idea that we would continue to play but invite other people to play. And I think John and Chris both felt very strongly that we should just keep it the way it was.
Right.
I don't want to misrepresent them. It's probably much more complicated than that. But anyway, from that point of view...
If they were here, we'd have an endless discussion
we'd have
about
a long conversation.
That would be the whole podcast right there.
Or it's part one of the podcast. You can do another one next week.
I mean, were you kind of like influenced by, I don't know, I've been in like activist groups where you try to do everything by consensus and that kind of thinking.
We were a collective, which meant that usually the last person standing got their way. We discussed everything, and I learned a huge amount from that process about both the value of it and the limitations of it.
Yeah.
From a creative point of view, I think I learned, for example, that it tends to not be productive if somebody produces an idea and then you discuss the idea before you try it.
Sure.
And so what didn't always happen, but often happened, is that somebody would come in with musical material, and before we tried it, we would then start dismantling it. And I think I've learned, if nothing else, that the first thing you do with musical material is actually play it.
Yeah.
And get to grips with it and see what it is, and then you can say, I'm totally surprised at how well this works. Or you can say, how about we change this?
Sure.
In other words, it's a process that starts from the moment that you actually make a sound and do something.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't start, because it's music, it's sound, it shouldn't start with a conversation.
You can get all wrapped up in ideas and then,
And the ideas might be good and interesting, but it doesn't respect the original idea in the way that it should. I think we have to respect the idea for what it is and see what it is.
Now, Henry Cowell had a particular approach to improvisation. Could you talk about that? How was it different from, I don't know, like jazz improvisation?
Oh, I think we would be totally intimidated by the idea that we could play jazz. I don't think any of us thought we were capable of it. I think we were influenced from a different direction. It's not as I know we loved Ornette and Mingus and Miles and Coltrane. I mean, it's not as if we weren't aware of that. In the same way that we were aware of Stockhausen and Berio and Cage and what was going on in contemporary music, because of what I said. Everything was available, so you could listen to all this stuff. And I think from our point of view, what we were trying to do is to have those kinds of open, creative, engaging processes available for a rock band, rather than trying to be something that we're not. So we were a rock band trying to deal with experimental practices and see where it led us. And from an improvising point of view, I mean, it's kind of funny, but I always joke that I actually invented improvised music. Only because when I first met Tim, before Henry Cowell, we were invited to perform for a dance performance, and the dancer was going to, the theme was Hiroshima. This was in 1967. And Johnny just met Tim, and he showed up with his saxophone, and I showed up with a violin. And we played for a dance performance without having any preconceived idea or discussion of what we were going to do. And therefore, it was an improvised music concert, and it was a mind-boggling and life-changing moment for both of us, I think, where we suddenly understood something about what we could do, what was possible. And neither of us were at all aware of the fact that there was a lively improvised music scene going on in London, because we weren't in London. Right. And so we, in that sense, I always say, yeah, we invented improvised music, but of course we didn't.
At that point, you were in Cambridge? Yeah. And you're from Yorkshire originally, right?
Yeah.
A lot of cows and
a lot
Yorkshire.
of
Sheep.
A lot of sheep, yeah. There are cows as well, but
I know people say, you say, Henry Cowell is just kind of a random, kind of goofy name. It doesn't have any real meaning, kind of like Dada or something.
Who knows? We did get a letter from Henry Cowell's widow asking about it.
I know a lot of people have made that connection to Henry Cowell, the composer. Was it? Well, anyway, I guess you can't say anything about it. But
My lips are sealed.
you mentioned, because I picked you up at the hotel, and on the car ride over, you mentioned that you had met Sun Ra many times and had some interesting stories. So what's a memorable moment? Hopefully people know who Sun Ra is, sort of avant-garde jazz guy who was from another planet.
Saturn. Yeah, I mean, I'd known the music, of course, was very exciting. Heliocentric Worlds of Sun Ra was a big record for us. And I first actually had a physical interaction was because Chris Cutler had started a record distribution service, recommended. And he'd arranged to order 50 LPs from Sun Ra. And we had played a duo concert at the Squat Theatre in New York, and the following day, Sun Ra were playing at Squat. So Chris said, hey, we can just leave our gear there, and then we can pick our gear up the next day when Sun Ra comes in. And we had a concert that night in Connecticut, but we'll do all that, and then I can kill two birds with one stone. So we're waiting for Sun Ra to show up on 23rd Street, and waiting, and nothing's happening. And we've loaded the car, and I'm the driver, and I'm thinking, it's getting a bit late, And suddenly this Cadillac shows up, pulls up on the curb, white wall tires, very fancy car, and it's got Sun Ra, Marshall Allen, John Gilmore, and Danny Thompson in it. And Chris is waiting for the records, so Gilmore starts haranguing passers-by about the planet Saturn from the stoop of the house across, and then Marshall opens the trunk and hands blank white LP covers to Sun Ra, who's in the front, who then, with felt-tip pens, makes artwork on the cover of the record, and then Danny Thompson puts the LP into the cover and hands it to Chris, who's standing with his arms out on 23rd Street. Repeat 50 times. So we wait for 50 hand-drawn Sun Ra covers right in the rush hour.
Are people honking?
No. It was very chill. But, but it was an experience, as you can imagine, that will stay with me.
Yeah. It's a bit surreal, and then you've met him on other occasions. You ever have conversations?
With Sun Ra himself, no, but with some of the bandmen, yeah. And I've shared dressing rooms with Marshall and Danny Thompson in particular. Danny gave me a card for Pharaoh's Den, which was the grocery store he used to run to try to keep Sun Ra afloat in Philadelphia. And I later heard that actually what really happened is that all the band members went there and got free groceries, so they never made any money.
They kept the band alive.
It's a big band, so yeah.
So they could use a grocery store, yeah.
Right. No, I was playing with Naked City in a gig in Stuttgart with Sun Ra and Cecil Taylor and Tony Oxley duo. So that was a pretty memorable concert also, that particular combination of three people.
Yeah. Now talk about kind of after Henry Cow and you come to New York and you do a lot of different projects. There's Art Bears and is it all what are those years, 78 to 81 or something?
Which, the Art Bears?
Well, yeah.
All of it.
Well, it was Art Bears at Massacre.
There was a period.
You kind of had you were doing a few kind of really interesting sort of different projects at the same time.
When Henry Cow broke up, I was kind of at a loose end. I had no idea what I was going to do, and I had a phone call from Giorgio Gomelski, who invited me to come to New York and sent me a ticket. And am I going to say no? So I went to New York with a ticket paid by Giorgio to take.
And for those who don't know, explain who that is.
Giorgio was a very eccentric entrepreneur who had been originally involved as the manager of the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds and had produced the first John McLaughlin record and ended up being Magma's manager, which is where I met him. And so he's somebody...
Magma, they're like a kind of psychedelic French band?
They're French, crazy, yeah. They were a huge group in France in the 70s. Yeah. We often did double bills with them with Henry Cow. So I knew Giorgio from that. And he invited me because he was doing a festival, the Mani Festival, which was supposed to bring European and American strands of experimental music together, and did. And it was a chaotic, crazy event. It went on all night, and where I met many people who have become friends, including the residents. They were there, and Laswell and Co. and Tom Cora, endless. Anyway, I went to New York, and apart from anything else, I fell in love and ended up getting married the next year and moved to New York in '79. And I think it was just that moment between '78 and '83 where it seemed like anything was possible. All the venues were still putting on all kinds of music. They dried up. In the end, there was only the Knitting Factory, who then pretended they invented it. But of course, it had already long existed, and there was a very vibrant scene. And in those years, '78 to '83, it was like I did Gravity Speechless, Cheap at Half the Price. I did 3 Art Bears records. I did 2 records with Henry Kaiser. I played with Aksak Maboul. I did Massacre. Just starting Skeleton Crew. I mean, just an endless.
Yeah.
I mean, I was totally exhaustively in it, and it cost me my marriage.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, because I was just nonstop. I didn't have time for anything else.
Yeah, no, I get that. You know, it can take a toll. You know, I think, especially if your partner isn't kind of doing all those things with you.
Yeah, we don't have to go into that.
No, that's fine.
But anyway, yes, I know that I was gone.
But I love the Art Bearers record, The World as It Is Today, which, I mean, it's kind of, I hear echoes of like Brecht, Weill, Three Penny Opera, and then kind of stuff that sounds kind of like, if people know The Residents, or the kind of like aggressive atonal kind of elements. And,
atonal?
Or I don't know, maybe,
man.
Sorry, maybe not atonal.
It was very tonal.
Okay.
It was noisy.
Noise, maybe. Sorry.
No, I think that's astute to mention Weill. When I was a student, I had actually performed in several productions of Brecht Weill pieces like Mahagoni and The Happy End. I had been in the band playing for that music, and it became part of my DNA. So I was very influenced by Kurt Weill as a composer.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's between Weill and Bulgarian music, which had a huge impact on me also, because during the Henry Cow years, I had a very odd correspondence with a fan from Bulgaria who would send me Bulgaratone LPs, so I had a big collection of all kinds of Bulgarian music. And what he wanted in exchange was for me to send him books about Native American history.
That's interesting.
Which is like, I'm living in London. I've never been to the States.
Was that a strong interest of yours?
No, it was a strong interest of his.
But he was a fan of Henry Cow.
Yes, and he wrote, and then we had a correspondence, and it ended up with me sending him, going to Fall's bookshop and finding books and sending them to him and getting records in exchange, which I still have.
Well, it seems like you're a kind of person, you're open to these kind of connections.
What am I going to say? No, I don't know anything about it. I mean, I was curious to read it myself.
Sure, yeah. No, well, yeah, I guess that's what I'm getting at. You seem like you've always been a really curious person, a person that sort of, some people that, I don't know, are not.
I suppose.
And in fact, I guess like I am wondering kind of what initially interested you about whatever you want to call it, experimental, avant-garde, outsider music. Like, was it just that, you were kind of getting exposed to stuff and like, oh, this is interesting? Was there like a dissatisfaction you had with other aspects of reality?
I don't think I had enough sophistication to be dissatisfied with anything. That implies knowledge. I didn't really have any. I was, I'd been playing classical violin since I was 5, and then ended up playing blues guitar when I was 13. Played bass with champion Jack Dupree. Was involved in blues a lot, and then Henry Cow started, and I think it was just that kind of curiosity, which was always asking the question, I wonder what would happen if.
Yeah.
without any big agenda or purpose or anything else. We were just trying stuff out. And our influences at the beginning were pretty obvious. I mean, we were certainly quite influenced by the Soft Machine. We were certainly quite influenced by what early Frank Zappa and all that. But then it started to go into completely different directions. And I think that's also partly because of the way that we improvised, which is not at all like the way that improvisers improvise. We were much less, in a way, restricted. There's a sense in which the early British improvising scene, which was trying to shed jazz language and find a language which was theirs, and it ended up with a certain kind of dogma about, no melody, no pulse, those, which are still to a certain degree inherent in the way improvisers think of themselves or think of their work. And we never had that, so improvisers tended to look down on Henry Cowell. We were not regarded with fondness by the improvisers, with the solitary exception of Derek Bailey, who used to come to Henry Cowell concerts and encourage us, which was great. And he was a wonderful mentor for me, he and Lol Coxhill, because they both were open to anything.
Yeah.
And Lol in particular, he played all kinds of music, and he gave me the permission in a way to understand that I could do whatever I wanted. I didn't have to stick to these rules about what improvised music is supposed to sound like or what an improviser is supposed to do. So I was super lucky to have those two people in my life to give me that encouragement.
I've always wondered if, like who may have been influenced by Henry Cowell. Like, I don't know, like, was David Bowie influenced by you? Did he listen to you?
I would be shocked if that was the case.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like he listened to a lot of
stuff
and tried to, in his own way, bring avant-garde stuff into the mainstream.
It's always interesting to find out people who you wouldn't imagine knew who we were, who turned out did.
Are there some people
like
you know
Max
about?
Roach.
Max Roach, yeah.
Or, people who I met, and they knew who we were. They knew what we were doing. It's like guitar players. In the end, guitar players are always interested in guitar players. So, I met Jim Hall and people like that, and they all knew they'd all heard my record. They all knew what was going on.
Right,
much to my astonishment. And it was great, of course.
Art Bears actually reminds me a little bit of, what was that album that Max Roach did with Abby Lincoln that was very political? I'm forgetting it now, but anyway, but you listened to a lot of Max Roach as well, right? I mean,
very early stuff. I wasn't so much listening to the contemporary stuff at that time, but I'd certainly listened to all the early bebop.
Yeah. Let me ask you about working with John Zorn and Ikue Mori, those people in New York, and the way that they improvise. Is that was different from?
Well, the way John and Ikue improvise is different from each other already anyway. Two completely different worlds. And I think when I arrived in New York, John was at the center of a small group of people who were kind of exploring a way of improvising which was more event-oriented. So it was very much about short durations. I think John openly acknowledged that he was influenced by cartoon music, so it was constantly changing all the time. And so I got involved with that, and I had a very telepathic relationship with Zorn. We were able to work very quickly, change ideas very quickly. So we made a lot of concerts and records together in those early days, and it certainly changed my way of listening and changed my way of thinking. But Ikue was the drummer with the band, DNA, and she was playing drums, and people would look at the drums and not get a sense of, does she really know what she's doing? For all kinds of reasons, sexism or whatever. But if you played with her, you would immediately come to the very interesting conclusion that she always did exactly the right thing at the right time, which was fascinating. Her timing and her placement were so precise. And when she moved to drum machine and eventually to computer, I guess we were all wondering how that would be from that point of view, and it was just the same. You play with Ikue, she always does the right thing at the right time. And it's not about rapid exchange or any of those things. It can be, but she's open to all kinds of approaches. So, I still play with Ikue from time to time. We made a record a couple of years ago, so.
Yeah. But you bring up an interesting point that, some people listening I mean, maybe with her it was sexism or whatever, thought, oh, can she really play? But I think that's like something, how do I say, like when you're trying to do something really new, like you're creating sounds on the guitar that maybe we haven't heard, someone who doesn't understand what you're doing might be like, oh, does this guy know how to play guitar, you know? And I wonder, like, my question is, do you have to know how to play guitar in a traditional way to make interesting music on a guitar?
I don't think so. I think you can start from a completely different point and arrive at a completely different point, and it doesn't matter. I think you can also have your traditional background, as I do, and arrive at a new point, and that's my history. And the background is important in the history. It leads to certain kinds of choices that I make because I have that history. If I didn't have that history, I would make other choices, which would be just as interesting. So I don't feel like it's either one or the other. I feel it's like there are multiple different ways of approaching an instrument. And some of them might involve years of unlearning or learning and then unlearning, and some of them might say, what's this object? What can it do? There's an exercise I do in my workshops. I ask everybody in a circle to do a short solo to introduce themselves, normal, and they do. And then I say, how about this? We'll do another solo, and this time you're going to look at your instrument as if you've never seen it before, you have no idea what it is, and you have no idea what it's for, and you're going to do a solo from that point of view. And of course it's fun, and people get really into the theater of it, and, and we go around the circle. And at the end I say, now, having heard that material, how many people thought that the second round of solo, which round of solos did you find more interesting? An overwhelming majority always find the second version more interesting than the first.
Right.
Because the first is telling us what you know about yourself, telling us things that you already know in a sense. And the second one is this absolute unknown.
Right.
And so then understanding that the axis of improvised music exists precisely at the difference between what you know and what you don't know, that's a very interesting starting place. In other words, to allow yourself to explore what you don't know rather than just always operate with what you do.
Yeah.
So
it sort of reminds me of the philosophy, was it D.T. Suzuki who wrote Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, the idea that like you should, I don't know, experience how, you know, as if you've never experienced anything before. You go in like you've never meditated, you've never, you know. Was Zen an influence on you? I know it was an influence on John Cage.
Not consciously until much later. Now I think I'm aware of Zen in a certain way, not least because I did music for a film about Zen, which was very wonderful.
Oh, what film was that?
It's called Zen for Nothing. It's by Werner Pencil, one of the original people who did Step Across the Border, and it's basically follows a Swiss actor who goes and lives in a monastery in Japan for a period of a year and follows the things that happen and the things that she learns and so on. Yeah. And it's based on the sayings of a monk called what's his name, Kodo Sawai, who was the illegitimate son of a gangster and a prostitute who ran away from home and found himself outside a monastery in the mountains a few months later in the winter and knocked on the door to be admitted, and they wouldn't admit him. Then I think they realized that if they didn't admit him, he would die, and that wouldn't look so good, so they let him in. Right. And 30 years later, he was the head monk of this place. And his way of talking about Zen is exactly the way that you would think the illegitimate son of a prostitute and a gangster would talk. It's very blunt. Yeah. It's very much in your face. And I really, really liked what he was saying. So I got to watch that. That was a very big experience for me to do that film.
Yeah. But the idea that you said of like unlearning, you know, you had all this training and then you have to like look at your guitar like you've never seen a guitar before. Was that difficult for you? Was that something? I mean, what was that process like?
I think that's just everyday life. I mean, I think when you get up on stage and improvise, the most important thing I learned at the very beginning is that not to prepare anything. If I prepared something, nothing would ever happen. you can get up on stage to do a solo concert, and I did at the very beginning of my solo career, and I would say, I'm going to start with this, I'm going to end with that, and I'm not going to forget to do that and that and that because they're fun. So you have a map of the things that you're going to do, and all that happens is you do the things.
Right.
And nothing actually happens. It's dreadful music. It's just a series of demonstrations of something which may or may not be interesting. Whereas if you learn, as I learned from doing Tai Chi, to empty yourself of all intention. I used to do Tai Chi before playing, partly for this very reason, that you become completely empty and then you get on stage without having any idea of what you're going to do. And then everything follows from the first gesture you make, whatever it is. And the first gesture might be somebody in the front row dropping something, or it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. What it is it's information that you can then build on and build with. So for me, that's all about listening. It's about how you are open and listening to anything that's going on, and it's got nothing to do with the instrument as seen from a technical point of view. It's the instrument as a resonator, as a means to arrive somewhere without knowing what it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. When you started doing that, was it scary?
No.
Because you're kind of like naked on the stage, and it's like you don't know what you're going to do. The audience doesn't know what you're going to do, and you got to do something. And you want that surprise and everything, but it could be bad. It could turn out bad, right?
That's the great thing about improvised music that I think we tend to forget is that what's different about it, there's certain things that are different about improvising than anything else. One is that you and I are hearing the same thing at the same time without either of us knowing what's going to happen. There's no other audience-performer relationship quite like that. You don't know what's going to happen, neither do I.
Right.
And the other thing is, this may not work. I may screw this up. This may not end up in a place that I'm happy with. You have to take that risk every time you get on stage. It's not as if you can overcome that by doing something you know. That's not going to help. You have to just accept that risk is involved in what you're doing. So yes, it might be a terrible concert.
But that's subjective too, right?
Totally. I mean, you don't.
Even if you hate what you've done, there might be people that come up afterwards like, "Oh my God, it's the best concert I've ever seen," right?
I remember touring with Captain Beefheart, and at the end of the concert, he would come off stage and say, "That was the worst shit I ever played in my life," and they loved it.
Yeah. So no accounting for taste. Before we go, I do want to, if there's people listening who don't tend to, maybe they listen to pop music or whatever, but they're like, well, this seems interesting. This guy seems fun. I want to hear his stuff. Do you feel like some people have maybe a fear of music that seems too arty or something, right? And what would you say to someone who, I don't know, is not used to this kind of music?
I wouldn't really know where to begin. I think, of course, there are people who are afraid, and they're very often led to be afraid by other people's opinions rather than their own. They've heard something from somebody or read something from somebody, and they therefore think that they know something. I mean, the fact is, you don't. You don't know. And I think what I like is the fact that the less you know in advance about this music, probably the more you're going to enjoy it. I remember playing in Chile, first time, Santiago. They had rented a hall, big hall, and they had curtained off enough room for 100 people, which is what they expected to come. And there was a local band playing first who were booed off. And me and Chris Cutler are going to play improvised music. And instead of 100 people, 1,200 people came.
Okay.
So we had to take the curtain away and, open up the whole space. We had 1,200 people who'd never heard this music before and had no idea what it was going to be, who were listening to this music. And it was colossal success. It was like we were the Beatles or something.
Right.
I mean, they absolutely adored it. Because they had no preconception about what it was supposed to be or what they were supposed to be or anything else. They were just experiencing it as the communication that we were making. And I think if you are willing to experience something as pure communication, there's absolutely nothing to be afraid of in this. It is going to be a journey. I don't know where we're going to go. I don't know where we're going to end up. Neither do you. Could be fun.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been a real pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you.